Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the Cary Stayner case. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll go through Cary Stayner's background, then I'll move to the timeline of the crimes, then talk about the mental health and personality factors. Cary Stayner was born in Merced, California on August 12, 1961. In 1972, a man named Kenneth Parnell kidnapped Stayner's younger brother, Stephen. Parnell would hold Stephen captive for over 7 years. In 1980, Stephen escaped along with another victim that Parnell recently kidnapped. Stephen saved the other victim. This case drew a significant amount of attention from the media, even leading to a television movie titled, I Know My First Name is Stephen. Stayner would later indicate that he was neglected by his parents as they focused their attention on Stephen instead of him. In 1989, Stayner's brother died at age 24 in a motorcycle collision. Cary Stayner's uncle was murdered in 1990. Stayner was living with him at the time. Stayner would later say that his uncle offended against him during the time that Stephen was Parnell's captive. In 1991, Stayner would attempt to bring an end to his own life. In 1995, he had a friend take him to a mental hospital, saying that he was having a mental breakdown. We see a couple of reports of mental or nervous breakdowns. In 1997, he was arrested for having methamphetamine and marijuana in his possession, but he was never convicted. The same year, he went to work in El Portal, California, at the Cedar Lodge Motel. This was near the entrance of Yosemite National Park. Stayner was a handyman there. Now moving to the timeline of the crimes. On February 15, 1999, Stayner went to one of the hotel rooms where there were 3 guests staying: 42-year-old Carol Sund, her 15-year-old daughter Julie, and a 16-year-old friend named Silvina Peloso. He told them he was there to fix the fan in the bathroom. He produced a .22 caliber revolver and tied up the victims. He murdered Carol and Silvina right away and committed an assault of a sexual nature against Julie. He put the 2 bodies in the trunk of their rental car and put Julie in the passenger seat. He started driving at about 4 a.m. the next morning, so February 16. He didn't know where he was going. He ended up at Lake Don Pedro, where he assaulted Julie again before murdering her. He hid her body nearby and drove the car deeper into the forest. He would take a cab back to Yosemite Valley using money he had stolen from Carol. He went back 2 days later and set the car on fire. At some point, he left her wallet in Modesto, California, to throw off the authorities. The burned-out car was found over a month later. Julie's body was recovered about a week after that because Stayner sent a map to the FBI. Now moving to July 21, 1999, Stayner approaches a 26-year-old nature guide named Joy Ruth Armstrong at her cabin. He produces the .22 caliber revolver, abducts Armstrong, and eventually kills her. She was decapitated. Her body was found on the 22nd. Witnesses reported seeing an unusual vehicle at Armstrong's cabin around the time she disappeared. It was an International Scout, the same type of vehicle owned by Stayner. Stayner had been questioned by the FBI in the triple homicide, but after Armstrong's body was found, they questioned him again. As they were building their case, Armstrong left and went to a nudist colony. The manager there called the authorities after recognizing him from a notice that was published. When the authorities arrived, the manager pointed out that Stayner was easy to locate because he was the only one wearing clothes. I guess this guy really couldn't fit in anywhere. They brought Stayner back for more questioning, and he confessed to the crimes. While in jail, Stayner was interviewed off camera by a local TV station where he said that he was guilty, he had murdered the women. He explained how he committed the triple murder, and he talked about how, after having a chance conversation with Armstrong, he could not resist the urge to kill her. Stayner was charged with murder. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. In 2002, he was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death, but this was in California, so it's likely he'll never be executed. Now moving to the mental health and personality factors. At his trial, expert testimony revealed a number of different theories about what was going on with Cary Stayner's mental health. There was testimony about schizophrenia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, autism, and paraphilia. But regardless of what disorders he may or may not have had, the prosecution was able to convince the jury that Stayner knew what he was doing. I'm not surprised that schizophrenia was brought up. This is a common tactic used when defending murderers. I'm not aware of any reports indicating he was delusional and or having hallucinations at the time he committed the crimes or at any other time in his life. We see this other report that said that at age 3, he was diagnosed with trichotillomania. This is a disorder where somebody obsessively pulls hair out from different places on their body. There's no connection between this disorder and homicide. It appeared as though his motive was consistent with that of other serial killers, suggesting he had fantasies of domination and he may have had psychopathic characteristics like a lack of empathy. There's this question as to whether Stayner was actually a serial killer. Did he technically qualify for that term? The answer depends on which definition is used. I typically think of a serial killer as someone who commits 3 separate murders separated by a cooling off period. That was the accepted definition for a long time, but now we see some use the definition that involves just 2 murders. It's hard to know what he would have done in the future, but I think he would have killed again. So whether or not he was considered a serial killer, I think he would have become one in the future. When Stayner took notice of Armstrong, he realized that he probably had gotten away with the first 3 murders, yet he still could not resist his impulses. When Stayner held Julie Sund captive, he believed there was some type of special connection between them. He told her that he wished he could have kept her. I think this is actually pretty common with serial killers. If there was some type of world where they could kidnap victims and not kill them, I think many would do that. I think the killing is often because they don't want to get caught. They don't want to leave a witness behind. Although some serial killers really want to commit a homicide. It wouldn't matter if they could keep the victim and not be caught or not. Regardless of what this may or may not say about his motive, we see this lack of insight about relationships. He just couldn't understand how his victim was feeling. It seems likely that Julie was terrified of him, but he saw the circumstances as almost poetic, like it was unfair that he was going to kill her and couldn't be with her. As far as Stayner's personality, it would stand to reason that he had above average openness to experience. For instance, he was voted the most creative student by the graduating class at his high school, and he used to draw cartoons frequently. We see mid-level conscientiousness. He worked as a handyman, so clearly there was some attention to detail, but he also had a series of low-level jobs before that. We see low extroversion. Friends described him as shy and reserved. He probably had mid-range agreeableness, but he clearly demonstrated low agreeableness when he was committing homicides. As far as neuroticism, Stayner seemed emotionally reactive at times, but we also know that he could be calm and manipulative at other times. Like when he was first interviewed by the FBI, he was not thought of as a suspect due to how calm he remained during questioning, which of course is not a good reason to eliminate a suspect, especially when the crime that's being looked at is so closely tied to psychopathy. Friends also said that he was rarely upset by anything that happened to him. Here we see something that connects Stayner to other serial killers, this unusual pattern of neuroticism, where they can appear to have no emotions, tolerate extreme stress, and carry out grisly homicides, yet at the same time, they demonstrate poor impulse control, and they're emotionally reactive. For example, they give in to anger. There are a lot of theories about what caused Stayner to kill. Some people wonder if there's not some connection to what happened with his brother Stephen, specifically how Stayner may have been ignored because of the shift in attention over to his younger brother. Stayner had homicidal urges prior to his brother's kidnapping. He claimed that when he was 7 years old, he was at the supermarket with his parents when he noticed the female cashiers. He started fantasizing about killing them. He wasn't going to win any awards for non-creepy behavior. Stayner makes Chucky look like Winnie the Pooh. I can just imagine that the cashiers were looking at Stayner and seeing, of course, a 7-year-old boy, and they might have thought, oh, he looks like a cute kid. He's probably interested in watching TV and playing with friends. No, as it turns out, he wanted to murder them. If that doesn't exemplify creepy, I'm not sure what does. Now, it could have been that he had this predisposition toward violence, and what happened to his brother only made that worse, like it was a stressor that activated a negative characteristic. It is also possible that Stayner was maltreated when he was young. He claimed that he was. I think people look at his accusations against his uncle and think that maybe Stayner made those accusations so he could compete with his brother. Like he could say, look, my situation was just as bad as his. Pay attention to me. But I think it's entirely reasonable to believe that he was telling the truth, and reasonable to believe that Stayner could have been involved in his uncle's homicide. His uncle was killed with his own shotgun when he came home for lunch. It was ruled a homicide. The police thought a burglar did it. As I understand it, the investigation was reopened now that Stayner was arrested for these other murders, but I'm not aware that they have found anything in that case. Now, one of the things we see with many serial killers is they have difficulties in relationships with women. Stayner's friends said that they never saw him go out on a date, even though several women were interested in him. Other people reported that Stayner liked to appear naked in front of women. This wasn't something the women agreed to. He almost got in trouble a few times for doing that. Taking this information and combining it with everything else, the picture starts to become clearer. Stayner did not relate to women well. He had violent fantasies, impulse control problems, perhaps was maltreated, and experienced the stress of what happened to his brother. One possibility in a case like this is that the OCD led to his fantasies, the obsessive-compulsive disorder. This is fairly common and would be consistent with having fantasies in an early age. Maybe Stayner struggled to make sense of the obsessions or felt overwhelmed by the obsessions. Like this homicidal behavior created congruence between his obsessions and his actions. The word that really stands out when thinking about Stayner is atypical. He targeted people where he lived. He had planned to kill other victims prior to the victims he selected. He spent a good deal of time with them, so he was planning on killing people that he knew. So having a relationship with people didn't offer any type of protective element. He was dangerous to everybody. Stayner drove an unusual vehicle. He wore clothes at a nudist colony. He confessed even though the authorities did not have strong evidence against him. And apparently, he was carrying a novel about serial killing at the time when he was active. At the same time, he was very effective at cleaning the crime scene, removing all DNA and hair from the motel room. He told the FBI he learned that from the Discovery Channel. I must have missed the series on pro tips for impulsive homicide. Stayner was not anywhere near the proficiency of other well-known serial killers like Joseph DeAngelo, Gary Ridgway, Robert Hansen, or Arthur Shawcross. I think when he was arrested, he was still in the early stages of his serial killing career, but I don't think he would have been able to get away with it too many more times. Even still, Stayner was frightening in the sense that he was able to fit in so well. Many people who knew him struggled to believe he actually committed the crimes. Those are my thoughts on Cary Stayner. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis on this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.